Hi, I'm Darnell with Live Young Lifestyle. And for me, if I'm going to eat meat, I want to make sure that I'm getting the most nutritious, the most nutrient dense, and the healthiest, happiest animals. The first step is being able to decipher the labels. So the labeling on all of these are not only confusing, sometimes they're misleading. So we're going to go over all of the labels so that you know exactly where your food is coming from. So there are many reasons why people choose to steer clear of all of this and become vegan or vegetarian. The first reason obviously is health. There's a lot of studies that show that you improve your health with a more plant-based diet. The second is environment, because the amount of resources that it takes to produce meat as food as compared to plants is tremendous, and this leaves a very big carbon footprint on the planet. And the third is the humane treatment of animals. Now, there's a lot of documentaries out there that are horrifying, but it really points out a true picture of what some of these animals go through in order for you to get your fast food burger. So me personally, I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a small ranch. We raised our own cattle for slaughter. I know that sounds awful. We did not sell our meat, but they would have a nice life on our pasture, and then they would make their way into our freezer. But that said, I do believe that if meat is part of your diet, you really should kind of reduce it a little bit. So I have a Meatless Monday where I'm a vegan on Mondays, but for a lot of people though, meat is still the main attraction on the dinner plate. But if you don't eat meat, chances are you know somebody who does. So maybe you wanna listen up and pass on this information to your meat-eating friends. So the first is when you see a package that says raised without antibiotics. So it can also say antibiotic free, but for this packet of bacon, it says open nature. This means nothing. This is just like something that this company slapped on there so you think that this was a happy pig. The only thing we know about this animal is that it was raised without antibiotics, and what this means is that there's no antibiotics given over its lifetime. So from the time that this animal was a baby, there was no antibiotics and there was no added hormones. So we don't know if this is a humanely raised animal or what the living conditions were or anything like that. We just know no antibiotics and no hormones. The next one that you could sometimes see, which I didn't even purchase this because I didn't really want it in my house, but the ones that would say grain-fed, this is grass-fed, but grain-fed beef is basically cows that have been in factory farms. They're in feedlots, they're fed corn and other grains to fatten them up. And cows are not genetically supposed to be eating corn. Their genetic DNA blueprint tells them that they're supposed to be eating grass, which is why if you see grain-fed or factory farmed meat, so in other words, there might be no labeling at all, just that it's what kind of beef it is, that is a factory farmed animal. It's been fed grain its entire life, which means it's probably on antibiotics because not eating what it's supposed to be eating will make them sick. And so that's why the factory farmed animals are full of antibiotics, because they're sick from what the farmers are feeding them. And they're usually on growth hormones as well. So I try to stay clear of stuff that's grain-fed. It's not good for us. It's also not good for the animals that we're eating. So the next one is grass-fed. Now this is grass-fed ground beef. And this is usually leaner. It's usually a little bit healthier. It's a little bit lower in calories, and it's a little bit more nutrient dense because again, the cow is eating what it's supposed to be eating. It also means the label of grass-fed means that it wasn't given any synthetic hormones, so no growth hormones, and also no antibiotics to prevent disease. This cow could have been given antibiotics if it got sick, but not any that prevented disease because it's not eating the corn. So it's eating stuff that's more like, what it's supposed to be eating. Grass-fed also, though, does not mean that it's only had grass its entire life. A lot of times these animals go to the slaughterhouse, and right before they get slaughtered, they're fed grains. So it doesn't necessarily mean they've never had grains. It just means for the majority of their life, that they've been fed grass. So if you really want something that's an animal that's only been fed grass, you want grass-fed, grass-finished. So pasture-raised are eggs, poultry, or meat that are raised outdoors. Animals were raised on a pasture where they're able to eat nutritious grass and other plants. So chickens can eat small worms and insects and things, seeds and stuff like that that they would naturally forage for. Pasturing meat allows animals to behave in a natural way. So cows are out being cows and chickens are out being chickens. So this is Mary's Chicken. This is a company that I really like. It's pasture raised and slow growth. So it hasn't had any growth hormones, and it's also like it's out being a happy chicken. So next we have free range. So these are free range. Now don't look at the organic. It means that the animal has access to outdoors, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they spend all of their time outdoors. Usually the farmer feeds the chickens inside, so they spend the majority of their time indoors, eating things that they're really not supposed to be eating for a chicken. And free range could be something as simple as they have a door to go outside and there's a small pen with a pile of dirt, and that is considered to be free range. So again, they're not very happy chickens, and they spend most of their time inside because that's where their food source is. But also remember that free range does not mean, unless it says it on the box, it does not mean that they were raised without antibiotics, and it doesn't mean that they were raised humanely. So you got to make sure you see all of that stuff. So the next thing that we have are cage-free. So this is cage-free. You see it right there. This is from Bristol Farms. Cage-free basically means that they are put in a giant warehouse and there are no cages for the chickens, but they are often overcrowded, overheated. These are chickens that are given hormones and antibiotics. They're made to speed up their growth. And you've seen, I'm sure, the documentaries where the chickens' breasts grow so big that their legs can't support them. That's where these kind of eggs are raised, and it's awful. So these are not humanely raised. These are full of antibiotics. They're full of growth hormones. This is just a tragic situation. So next we have organic. And if you haven't caught that video that I did on organic produce, that's a must see, because organic has very, very strict rules to be certified organic. So this is 100% grass-fed ground beef. So we already like the grass-fed. This is no added hormones ever, no antibiotics ever. And that's part of being organic. So they chose to add this on there, but that's already under the organic label. So organic means there's no hormones, no growth hormones, no antibiotics ever, even if that animal gets sick. So if that animal gets sick and the farmer has to give them antibiotics, it cannot have this label of organic. It also means that the animal is treated humanely. So organic is all underneath that category of humanely treated, no antibiotics, no hormones, and the feed that these animals have to eat or are eating is 100% organic as well. So they're not eating grass that's full of pesticides. They're eating organic because all of that translates into the meat that we eat. So this is very important. And the way that you see this is this little tiny USDA organic. That is the tiny stamp that you always want to look for. So let me show you the difference between these two products. So this one again is 100% organic, grass-fed. Same exact company, sun-fed ranch, okay? This says no added hormones ever, no antibiotics ever, which is why it's organic. This one, which says natural, which really there's no guidelines for natural. They could be inhumanely treated, they could be full of antibiotics, and this really doesn't hold true to anything. But, so if you look over here, this says no added hormones or growth promoting antibiotics ever. So in other words, this cow was not given antibiotics because to prevent it from being sick, like a grain-fed cow. This animal actually got sick and then had to be given antibiotics, and so could no longer be called organic. So understanding food labels so that you know exactly how your food was produced and where it comes from, that gives you a way to make informed decisions about what goes into your body. And that is a really good way to live young.